Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And I'd like to welcome you to Managing Family Life Online, brought to you by Trend Micro's Internet Safety for Kids and Families program. My name is Lynette Owens, and I am the founder and global director of the program, and I'm very excited to have our special guest, Matthew Hilgers, today to talk about gaming. And it definitely is a topic that has been very much top of mind for parents, certainly for kids, as we keep them safe at home during this challenging time. I'd also like to welcome our ASL interpreter Krista Lambert, and who's been with us for many sessions now. So we're really happy to have her back with us. So before we get started, a couple of things. I'd like to encourage you to use the chat to us as panelists at any time that you wish. Also to submit questions in the Q&A portion of your tabs there at the bottom of your screen. We will get to your questions towards the end of today's session, but don't feel that you need to wait for that time. Go ahead and put your questions in the chat. And before we get started, I'd actually like to ask a couple of questions. And you can also use the polling feature here just to get to know you, our audience. So the question is, what devices are your kids using at home for online games? You can actually pick more than one of these or choose all of the above. But those options are gaming consoles, mobile phones, tablets, or other kinds of devices. You know, I think there was one point where my kids were young enough to use the Leap pads, which I actually forgot completely about, but they're still very much around. So go ahead and choose which of these types of devices your kids are using for online gaming. And we'll let this run for a couple more seconds. In my case, A and B. At one point, it was A and C. Okay, we're going to just stop that here. So it looks like the majority of you are all of the above, which is probably no surprise. And that may have been a big shift over this past year. And a second question, if you could again use your polling option, which of these is your biggest concern when it comes to online games and your kids? Is it spending too much time playing them? Playing with people they don't know? Playing violent or age-inappropriate games? Or I don't have any concerns? Again, you can select more than one of these, or you can say that you don't have any concerns. So again, spending too much time on them, playing with people they don't know, or playing violent or age-inappropriate games. And we'll let that run for a little bit longer as well. I think that in our past sessions, screen time in general is a great concern, whether it's with games or with social media, or even for situations of remote schooling. But it's no surprise, and we'll just we'll wrap the poll here. It is no surprise at all that screen time is at the top of people's lists, followed by playing with strangers. Again, no surprise, because increasingly all things we do online are social, and that includes games, and that even includes games for some of our younger age groups. So I think that's a very legitimate concern. You know, third is the playing of violent or age-inappropriate games, and I hope we'll talk a little bit about ways that you can manage all of these before the end of today. So with that, I'd like to actually bring our guest on, Matt Hilgers. Matt is actually a colleague of mine. He is a senior manager of customer success as part of our Tipping Point group here at Trend Micro. But the reason I asked Matt to join us today is because he brings a really unique and very interesting experience to this conversation. Grew up very much a gamer and is still very much a gamer, self-professed, but certainly has proven this, and has since become a parent raising a gamer now. So Matt, welcome.
Thanks, Lynette. I'm really happy to be here.
So I think it would be of great interest to this group to hear a little bit about you first. And so can you tell us how old you were when you played your first video game?
Oh man, it's hard to remember back that far at this point, but the one I remember the most was my grandparents, who lived in Abilene, Texas, had the original Pong machine. So it was a little CRT monitor with the little twirly knobs, and that was the first time that I remember playing video games. So I mean, I mean that was in the early '80s, I guess.
Yes, yes, some of us remember Pong. Sorry to age oneself. And how much did you, once you started playing, how much were you playing as a child?
Well, it was definitely different times back then. So I mean, as things evolved, right? So I started with Pong, and it was just a kind of a, oh wow, this is really new, but we got bored really quickly with it because it was Pong. And then we moved up to the Atari 2600, and I remember my dad loved to play Galaga, and so we played a little bit there, but it really wasn't for extended periods of time. The longest I remember started playing for like a long time was really more in the Nintendo Entertainment Center, the original NES, like an '85. I got one of those. I still have it, and it still works. But that's whenever the game started getting a little bit longer, and I really started playing probably a lot of time whenever the Super Nintendo came out. And I remember that, I mean, there was Nintendo Power and the Nintendo Game Counselors. It was a really big cultural thing that was going on at the time. And the games that would come out were longer than they'd ever been before. And so my parents would use games as kind of carrots for me. So if I got straight A's, I'd get to get a game, and I'd get one maybe every 3 to 6 months, and I would just wait anxiously for that game. And my parents would lose me for at least an entire weekend. I would just go and just binge play the game. And so they knew that was okay, because once I was done with that, then I was theirs again for another 3 to 6 months. So that's when I really started playing games for an extended period of time, like in long runs like that.
So, and that's interesting because it sounds to me like your parents were certainly more liberal than mine were in terms of screen time, but that might have been a function of having so many other siblings. In my case, people complaining that they wanted their turn on the screens. But were there? I mean, did you have rules? Did your parents have any
So
sort of rules around it?
they didn't know a lot about it.
Okay.
Once Galaga was over, my dad was out of the picture. Everything else was too complicated. I think my mom played Super Mario a little bit, but really, I mean, they talked to me about it, and were interested in some ways, just seeing what I was doing. But most of the games that we were into then, they didn't have like Grand Theft Auto or any of the ones that were pretty like crazy violent. So it was Zelda and Mario. They were pretty tame, and they just knew I was really excited about it, and and that I would play myself out, right? Like eventually it would just go away, and I would complete the game, and that would be it. And I'd be back doing all the other normal things. I was an avid reader, and was in the band, and did things like that. So I was always active, and I think that allowed them to let me just get it out of my system ever so often.
Okay, so it sounds like you didn't give them a lot of reasons to worry that you would disappear for a weekend because you were doing all of the other things that you should be doing at that
It still
age.
made me do chores. I still had to mow the lawn and do everything.
Okay. Okay, so there were some rules. You couldn't get away with not doing them, right? Okay, that's good to know. And so can you describe what is it about gaming that you as a child loved so much, but even today you're still a gamer. What is it about gaming that you love so much?
I think there's some things inherent to just humanity, and that's like stories and games are just a piece of who we are. Expect there's always the in gaming, there's always the challenge element, right? There's a competition that's there. And then stories is, I mean, all the way back down to our oral history, right, where we started telling each other things. And so I remember, fantasy stories. My mom actually read me, Wrinkle in Time and The Hobbit and stuff when I was 7 and 8, and so I was an avid fantasy buff after that. And so these were just fantasy stories. They were great, great worlds to live in and to play in and see new things. And so I love the story element. I love anything that has to do with stories. So I mean, movies, games, anything. And games these days are almost like you're playing a movie in certain situations. I mean, especially the graphics are so incredible now that it feels like that. I've been playing sports games and my wife has walked by and thought that there was an actual game on, but I was playing it. So um, the immersion at this point is really incredible. But the story element is what really drives a lot of it for me. And then the fact that it is, you touched on it a little bit. Games are social, and they're incredibly more so now. They tried to be social a long time ago, because back in the Nintendo days when they had the Wizards championship and stuff, that where they would go around, there was a lot of people in the malls and stuff that would go to these giant competitions, and then kids would hang out in the arcades for almost all day. So there's always a social element, and now that's been cranked up to 11 with online MMOs, and every game has some kind of social aspect attached to it at this point. I mean, even the latest controllers for like the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation has it for all, but it's got a button that you can share game clips just at the touch of a button now. So they've really turned everything social, and so it's fun.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a couple of things. Number one, that the social element, specifically MMOs, if you could, for those who might not be familiar with the phrase, explain what MMOs are.
That's a massive multiplayer online game. So you have anywhere from 2 to 3 thousand to 10,000 players on a server. A lot of these are the ones that people would be familiar with are the role playing game ones, the MMORPGs, and that'd be like World of Warcraft is probably the most famous one. It started with EverQuest. That was one that was on there, and they've had many others. But those the most successful by far has been World of Warcraft.
Okay, and I do want to ask about how gaming has shaped your life, in particular, your family life. And I think it's a fantastic story, because I think gaming because it was a very important role in what your family is today. So can you share a little bit about that with us?
Absolutely. I do have it's a fun story, because gaming, I definitely wouldn't be here with my family without it. I was an avid World of Warcraft player. I played in beta and through, I mean, many of the first expansions for many years. And so as part of that, one of the things that you do inside the MMO games like that is you go on quests, and you typically do it with friends. And so you meet friends online, and so you join a guild, which is just a big group of different people that are playing together and fighting challenges, doing puzzles and completing challenges with each other. Well, I ended up actually meeting my wife on World of Warcraft. She was originally from Illinois, and I was from Texas, and we ended up on the same server together, and we're just playing games. And I think we played probably every night together for well over a year. and I got to know her for who she was, because as far as I was, she was a night elf. Like had no idea what she looked like. I just knew she had a sexy voice when we were talking over the voice channels, and we played great together. And so we not only did we complete challenges and do things inside the game itself, but then we also started just talking about real world stuff and getting to know each other. So it was way better than Match.com or anything else that you could be online for. And so yeah, we finally at one point in time decided to meet in real life. And her parents were probably not very thrilled about it. Her mom didn't realize that she was talking to somebody in Texas and that she was going to fly down to Texas to meet some crazy guy off the internet. But she was an adult at the time. They couldn't talk her out of it, and luckily it was just me, so it was okay. And then yeah, I went back up and visited her. We dated long distance for a while, and then she moved to Texas.
That is absolutely a romantic story. But I think it's also it's interesting because, and the reason I wanted to ask you about it is that I think gaming often is painted in a very negative light, especially when it has to do with children and gaming. And again, it's no surprise that parents are quite anxious these days for many reasons. Um, and yet they're the ones saying, yes, I will let you use the games because A, it's keeping you home and safe. B, it's keeping you connected with your friends and safe. um, and yet there's some inner angst and conflict going on about saying yes to this. So I think that when we hear stories, as you say, about the good things that can happen from gaming, and I'll ask you a little bit about another thing that I very much want the audience to hear about when it comes to gaming and the good that it can do. We don't talk enough about that. So that's the reason I wanted you to share that story. It turns out that there are many other people who may have had similar experiences to you, and that, where gaming actually changed your life for the better. Now, I want to shift now to where you are today, because you're on the other side of parenting now. You're not one asking your parents and telling your parents you're going to be using the games. You're now one to tell another person whether or not they're allowed to use games. So, what? Tell us a little bit about the relationship with you and your son. And how old is he?
He's 7. Yeah,
He's 7. Okay. And you do allow him to game, I understand.
I do. Yes, he is the product of 2 gamers, so it was inevitable at some point.
Yeah.
He at some point in time, they kids pay attention to everything, right? So I mean, I'm gaming, and I make sure that the games that I play, if he was around, were appropriate, right? Because I didn't want to expose him to some of the concerns that we talked about things that are past his age. I wait for him to go to bed for that stuff. But he watched me playing Minecraft and was instantly interested in it. And so I think it's definitely to touch on the a little bit of the worries that I had as a parent with games, right? Is that their games are almost designed to be addictive. There's game mechanics in there that want you to keep coming back to them. And I would have probably had problems, and my parents would have had problems when I was younger, had the games been like what they are today. Because when I mentioned that I could go and play a game and finish it over a weekend, that's because that was the length of the game and it would finish. Now, games don't end, right? Or you can put 400 hours into Skyrim and still be playing the game. And games like the World of Warcraft and Minecraft and things like that, there's no end to them. So you can just keep playing and playing and playing and playing. And that was definitely the concerns that I had starting out, was how do I manage this? Because I know personally, right, how they play on those game mechanics to make you want to keep playing. And how does that impact somebody so young, right? And so that was really the big concern. I felt like I had a good handle on being able to limit what type of games that he was able to play, because I mean he can't go buy his own right now, so it's completely to what dependent on what I provide him. Um, but the addiction element, the always wanting to be on aspect of it, was something that we had to really have. We actually talked with him about it, had conversations about how it's important. I definitely use some of the ISKF stuff when we talk about the kids, about how what you're doing in front of a computer all day, right? You're sitting down and you're not moving around, and your body wants to move, right? So we talked about how he still needs to remain active and do things. And so just to take the next step, right, in the conversation, one of the things that we said to put limits on is that he had to do a certain amount of activity to be able to play those games. And so he actually plays hockey, so which is kind of funny for a kid in Texas. You don't expect him to be on ice, but he does play hockey, and I coach his hockey team. And we are there Friday, Saturday, Sunday for several hours each over the weekends on the ice playing and working hard. And so those are times that he earns that time. And so we try to do as much as we can a one-to-one. Or if you're spending an hour on your exercising or playing outside and running, riding a bike, anything like that, then that is an hour that you can spend on games when it's appropriate for you to spend that time. Um, we'll use it. It's a great carrot. I'll say that too. I mean, it's a fantastic carrot. It was the first time that we said, "Hey, you're not going to get to play video games this weekend unless you behave yourself or do something." It was an immediate, just like, "Okay, yes, sir, absolutely." Like, I'm gonna do it. It's like, wow, I could really get used to this. It's toned down a little bit now that he knows the drill, but it's definitely it's a reward, right? So we can give it to him or take it away, right? As a privilege if he doesn't get it.
So what kinds of games are you allowing him to play right now? And which ones are you not allowing him to play?
So the ones that I like him playing are ones that have some level of creativity into it. So he's exercising his mind and not just blindly shooting things. So Minecraft is a great one, right? He can play in the world and build things, and he one of the other social aspects of it is that his cousins also play, who are in Illinois, and so they can get together and connect and play and build stuff together and create things, and they just get opportunities to be together that they wouldn't normally have, which is something that we really like about it. So that one's a good one. Portal Knights is another one that we like. It's another builder, but has a little bit RPG element. So instead of just being a plain Minecraft character, you can also be like a wizard or a fighter or a ranger, things like that, which is fun. And then just Minecraft Dungeons is another one that he and I will play together because it's pretty toned down fun just to go around and smash some zombies. I guess the Minecraft zombies. Those are kind of the his wheelhouse right now. There's some that he's not really shown interested in. Some of the other ones, like one is like the Blob, which is like a little one that you go and paint stuff around. There's a real cute one about a yarn character called Unraveled, that you go around and it's just like tracking down memories. So it's really sweet. But those are puzzle solvers, and he's really digging into being able to create his own stuff. So those are the ones that we sit on. The ones that I avoid are the ones that are more violent. So like I don't let him play Fortnite or anything. Like I think he's a little young for that right now. Those elements. So I really try to keep the kid ones like Animal Crossing or there's My Time at Portia, like little crafty, buildy, creative ones that are wholesome. If we gets into some of the Zelda games, then I'll probably let him play those too because they're not too bad, at
Uh,
least the little ones.
So you're mostly on the consoles versus a tablet or even a PC at this point.
So we're definitely tablet and console primarily because Minecraft can be played on all of them. And in fact, nowadays the tablets and the Xbox controllers, you can actually hook your Xbox controller up via Bluetooth to your tablet. So it's no difference. It's just a screen at that point for him. We don't do PC a lot because we try to keep the PC more for school related. So he does his schoolwork. Nowadays, with having to be virtual schooled at home, he's on Zoom a lot. He probably knows as much about Zoom as I do, which is funny because he teaches his teachers how to use Zoom. The kids are adapting very well to that, but we want to try to keep the computer more towards the educational side of things. So he does have access to YouTube for some of his school stuff, and so he may be able to log in and watch some Minecraft videos on YouTube, but mostly it's for his schoolwork and his online stuff there from a computer.
Well, and you mentioned that the games today are of concern. I agree with you because, and one of the things we advise very heavily to parents is if you can consider games that have a beginning and an end. A lot of the sports games have this. At some point, the game ends. NBA 2K21 now, Madden football, but some of those are quite complex for younger kids still. So are there any games that are timed that you might recommend for the younger age groups other than the sporting games?
There's not a lot of them that are timed like that anymore. I mean, there's maybe levels based, like the Unraveled one that I mentioned. Like you go and you complete one story, and that's the end of the level, and you can start it again. It's real easy for them to just click on the next level and keep going, though, right? And even in the sporting games, like I'll actually let him play. So we have I have the NHL game, and he likes to play the goalie in the practice. So he'll go back and forth from the goalie and try to block shots. And so we'll let him do that. But he can always start another practice
Yes,
session. And so it's you still have to manage the time. And I think that's where it's really good to have to understand the parental controls that are built into the gaming systems and the consoles, so you have that help to try to do it. Oh, and
absolutely.
I did see in the chat Rocket League. Rocket League
Yes,
is a
yes.
fun one. I think his Twitch skills aren't quite there yet. He's getting pretty good, but his Twitch skills aren't there yet.
Yeah, and for those who are not familiar with Rocket League, basically you play soccer, but you're a car trying to drive and hit the ball into the goal. But the cars can do flips, they can do all kinds of things. You can level up your capabilities as a car. I'm absolutely horrible at it. My son has tried very much to bring me in as his teammate. I'd rather play real soccer than Rocket League, but it does have an end.
Yeah.
There are moments in the game though where you can extend your time because you achieved something or you ran over something that bought you more time. So all of a sudden you thought there was 2 minutes left and now there's 4 minutes left. But in general, it eventually ends, unlike Minecraft. Um, and also for the older ones, the games like that have that sort of the battle royale games like Call of Duty, the new battle royale version for your older kids might be playing that, and then Fortnite. Um, because once there's a winner, it ends,
Yeah.
but not a specific time. And if they're going in as friends in the group, they can make it last for as long as they want because they don't want it to end. When they've told you when this game is over, I'll be done, right? They're very clever that way. So just real quickly, and I'm going to change headphones in a second here while I let you answer this question. You know, what advice would you have for parents in terms that are struggling with managing the screen time conversation? Because when you tell them 5 minutes, 10 minutes left, and then you finally say enough, these kids turn into a different animal. The anger levels,
Oh, yeah.
and the anger is not just because it's finishing. It seems like if they didn't accomplish what they had hoped in that session, that's what's really irritating to them. It's like an itch they can't scratch. So have you experienced that as a dad? And how did you handle that with your son?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So that different animal can definitely come out. I found that the closer to bedtime it is, the worse it gets. So one of the things that we've implemented is that you don't play at least an hour before bedtime, to get that wind down. But there's always a challenge there of wanting to, accomplish the next goal, or finish the building that he was making, or things like that. And so I really leverage the time constraints that are inside the Xbox family settings, because it's real easy to say you can set up windows, or of time that you can play that says, okay, look, this is the only hours that you're allowed to play, and you get 3 hours of time on Saturday and Sunday because it's the weekend, and you get 1 hour of time on the weekdays. So when are you going to, you are responsible. You can use that. Once you're in, that time is up, then I don't even have to be the one that enforces it. The game itself enforces it. It just immediately shuts it off. And it gives warnings at like 15 minutes and 5 minutes, and tells them that they're about to lose time. Um, Typically that's followed very quickly by my son running into wherever I am and asking for more time. And then that allows me to have the conversation with him about, okay, well, you've already used your time for today. What are you going to do to earn more? Or, sorry, it's too late, right? We're able to have those conversations without the temper tantrum and flare up, because it's not a surprise. I think it's sometimes it feels like whenever they're playing the games and it's just the parents yelling from the other room, hey, you've got 5 minutes, like turn it off. They don't pay attention because they're too engrossed in what they're doing on the screen. Or they're okay, it's 5 minutes, but I have no concept of what 5 minutes is anymore, because I'm playing a game, and time flies when you're having fun and you're engaged. So having that kind of countdown where it's like 15 minutes, okay, you've got 5 minutes, like you're about to lose it, and it's not coming from the parents. I feel like if it's coming from the parents, we'll just run in, then it inevitably ended up with me being, hey, you're going to turn this off right now, and if you don't turn it off, then I'm hitting the power button. And then it was a big fight, and he was upset, and we had to calm down from that before bed, and do that. So it really was a good, that those are good mechanics to put in place. So it feels like it's not necessarily the parents that are limiting the time, although they know that it's the parents doing it, but it's the machine that's doing it for them.
Yeah, and so Matt, I'd love to share a couple screenshots that you had shared with me, if we could, with the audience, to see exactly how this works, specifically within the Microsoft Xbox consoles, I believe.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's actually the family settings. So it's across the Windows 10 and all of the Xbox families. But in the family settings, you have the ability to add different family members, and then you can change the screen time and game time limits. And so this is actually a screenshot of my family. I could limit my wife's if I wanted to, but then I would get in serious trouble. But so it's my Vincent, my son there that I normally hit, and so the next slide shows the screen time page.
Oh, yes.
And then, so on that one, this is where you can actually set, and this was regardless of application, or they call them all applications now, but regardless of game or what they're doing. This is the windows of time that my son could possibly play in, and then the length of time that are his default time limits. What's good is that if he does want more time, he can quickly send a message that says, hey, can I have more time? And either through the app on the phone or email, I can add another 30 minutes, or I mean, even up to 8 hours if you wanted to go crazy. But really, it's just you can, these aren't hard limits that you have to really go log in and do a lot of different steps to go change if they want to give them some additional time. Like maybe they've done really well in school, and so you gave them another hour. They got an A on a spelling test or something, and you're able to give them another 30 minutes because they worked so hard. It's easily done through the app and stuff. And then the next one is actually where you can get granular and do individual app and game limits. And so this is an example for Portal Nights. So this is the only time that he can play on Portal Nights, and the amount of time. And then it also has the button there that you can actually block the app. And so if you get into, this is where you don't have to go in and just turn the power button off to the console. You could actually just go ahead and block the app. And I will say that, sometimes there's been, it just, the moon is in the right phase or something. And, it's time for him to not be able to play games anymore. And so we'll take a couple of days break or even a week break, and I can easily block the apps so he's not going in there and doing it by just, look, I'm turning off your games because you need to take a week off.
Yeah, this is great. And I actually, so I highly recommend that people download, if you have an Xbox, or if you are gifting the Xbox Series X, if you are one of the very lucky people to have gotten a hold of an Xbox Series X and will be gifting that to yourself or to your family or to your children this holiday, download the Xbox Family Settings app that Matt was talking about. The app itself just launched in September of this year, but the capabilities existed within the console before and on the website. I think it's just easier, as you say, to do it without having to lift yourself up off a chair. Just do it right from the app. Who wants to move? And I think that's great. The other thing I would say is, Matt, I know you are one of the lucky people who do have the Xbox Series X. What's it like?
It's really nice. It's very fast. The loading times have been incredibly improved. And then it also has a pretty crazy feature if you hop around to a lot of different games, that it keeps your game state. So you can have, I don't know, 7 or 8 different games open and just jump right back into them. So it's pretty, yeah, it's pretty nice. It's definitely the next gen, the beefy system. So one thing I do want to mention too, inside, back with the parental controls, and this is something we talked about earlier, about kind of like concerns about playing with people that they're not supposed to play to. Inside those parental controls on the consoles, you can do something with the count for this for your kid that does not allow them to add friends. And I think this is probably one of the biggest things that you can do for your kids, is prevent, especially younger kids, prevent them from adding friends, because random people will sometimes invite them to be a friend, and if they don't know any better, they'll accept it. But if you completely block friends, then you can control who you manually add as a friend. And so, like for my son, we've added all of his cousins and a couple of his friends from school that we know and trust. And so we went in and manually added those as friends. And when I say manually, I briefly allowed the invite for friends, invited those friends, and then turned it back off again. And then that way I know those are the only friends that he can talk to, and they're safe to be around. And that limits a lot of his communication with people that he shouldn't be talking to.
Yeah, and I think I want to make a comment on the social aspect of gaming, and that is, some games have done a really good job. Rocket League is one of them. They do not allow open chat. You have to you select from pre-written text options. So you can, I was shocked when I was playing with my son who was trying to teach me, and realized we were playing against another group. I don't know who they were or where they were. And I see a chat string going on the top of the screen. And I said, wait a minute, are you chatting with people you don't know? And by the way, he was 13 at the time. He's 14 now. And then he realized, but I can only pick certain things. And so it was phrases like, nice shot, next time, or great save, and I love that didn't allow for the open chat. Unfortunately, this isn't something that's widely available in games, but I think I would, if I were reviewing games, I would, for kids, I would give those extra stars if they didn't allow for open free chat.
Yeah, and the PC games are probably the hardest with the open chat. Those have a tendency to be more open, and so you either have to just completely disable chat, totally, or help monitor. They have certain, like, I guess, minimal features like profanity filters and things like that you can enable, but very rarely do they have the limitations that you would actually want for talking to people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to mention a couple of things. For those of you not using the Xbox, perhaps your kids are using the iPads, or you're using maybe a different console, or maybe a different kind of device. The capabilities for family settings and parental controls, and by the way, many of them are moving away from the phrase parental controls and starting to call them family settings, digital wellness. It's very interesting to watch this transformation, because I think they realize that there are healthy things about it, and then there are not healthy things about it. And so this is something to help you with the wellness piece. These have gotten better, much, much better. And I think someone put in the chat about Roblox, for example, who's gotten better. I would say their parental controls or their family settings, are not perfect. I think there are some, weaknesses to it. There were ways that I could get around it. I pretended I would be one of my kids to get around it. But the fact that these companies have very large safety staff is very telling about the investment they're making, especially this year when they know that all of them have enjoyed quite a ride in growth of usage and sales. And they know that's being heavily fueled by people with kids, families. So they do not want to lose them. They want them to come in and stay forever. So they know they're being watched. But none of them are perfect. But so spend the time. Take a look at iOS screen time. That is the name of the setting where you can restrict the kinds of apps, the amount of time, and so on within, let's say, an iPad, for example. Matt, I want to actually, this has been great, and I want to make sure we leave time for questions from the audience. Some of them I think have been put in the chat, but also in the questions. So I'm going to turn to one of our questions now. I encourage everybody to go ahead and submit your questions in the Q&A if you have any. This question is, can you comment on free-to-play, particularly on mobile OS games? They're extremely aggressive with advertising, sometimes inappropriate ads. So I've worked in the industry for a decade and very familiar with how they design games to be addictive and these gaming loops to be addictive. So any comments on these free apps and which are basically sort of the freemium models?
Yeah, I think the biggest recommendation I can make is to turn off notifications, because part of the design that the in the question that we're talking about here is the wanting to make you come back and play over and over again. And so many of them, I mean, and this started with like Farmville, right, on Facebook back in the day, but now it's evolved into so many different mobile apps that they're constantly sending your phone notifications to try to get you to come back into the app, right? Oh, it's time to go collect your treasure or water your crops or do things like that. Like the time-based mechanics are probably some of the strongest game mechanics that are out there. I mean, it works in the real world too. I mean, if you think like happy hour is a time-based mechanic, right? If you show up at a certain time, you get free drinks. That is what the apps are using. And so if you turn off those notifications so that they're not able to announce those constantly or make the little ding sound to get your attention back to the phone, then they somewhat lose the power a little bit. That's
And
the way I can think of.
one of the biggest offenders right now is Among Us, because you have the option. You don't really have an option. You're going to see an ad. Once you complete the game, it launches an ad. The same with Agario.io and Slither.io. I think that's how you say it. But and you have the option to select whether you want the ads customized to you or not. So my advice was say no. So because how do you think they customize it to you? It means they've got to collect a lot of information about you and what you're doing. Who knows where they're collecting it from? And that way they're figuring out how to give you at least an ad that you want to see. For a child, I don't think this is necessarily, it's not a great option, to be honest. Unfortunately, Among Us is very popular and super fun. And at some point, they'll probably have a version that without ads, which means you're going to pay. You're going to pay for that to happen, right? I think HBO figured out this model long ago with TV programming. Absolutely.
You gotta pay. I mean, the only other thing, and I hesitate to even recommend it, but you can find ad blocker programs that will block ads, but you got to be really careful with those because they can be riddled with malware and things that you don't want as well. So ads are they're just a challenge. It's one of the things we talk about again with ISKF, right? Is saying, what are you really paying? How are you paying for these free apps? And you're paying for it with your information and the data that you're sharing, and it's part of using it. So I mean, you got to have conversations with your kids, and I think disable those notifications or go ahead and pony up and pay for the ad-free version, depending on some of them don't even have it because they make more money with ads than they would for having you pay for it. So
right, that's right. $1.99 an app doesn't really get them very far. We have another question here in the chat. What about gaming PCs? My son wants to move from the Xbox to a gaming PC. And what are the security measures I can use to protect him from malware and viruses and so on?
So I'll first do my gamer plug, and that I ask the kids all the time, like, which one's the real gaming system? PlayStation, PC. The real answer is all of them. So don't have them give up on everything just yet. But migrating to a PC, you definitely need to have your antivirus and malware settings set up. I would recommend if you have a network monitor, any of the software that allows you to do content filtering. That's a good one as well, because you can reduce the risk of certain things coming in or block them out completely. And then again, it's going to be dependent on exactly what you're looking at. There's Steam that's out there. I mean, EA has Origins. There's all these different gaming platforms that are available. And Google's even getting into it with Stadia, where you can play anywhere. So there's really too many to go through. You have to look at what settings they have to lock down. And I would try at first to possibly look at if you have a parent account, so that you can be the one that's in control, and then create a family account or a child account that then you allow your child to log into, because that will give you the most control over it.
Matt, real quick, and we'll probably have to wrap it up in a little bit here, but this has been fantastic. We have previously said, since everybody's working from home and many kids are going to school from home, and now the network is being used for gamers in the home, do you recommend, one of the things we recommend is that you separate your router, your network, so that things with sensitive information like your work laptop is on the main, part of it, and then you put your kids' devices on the guest network. Would you recommend that for a gaming PC? I would for a console or a kid's
I probably
fire.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't for a gaming PC, because you want to have the same kind of level of protection for the PC. It's still a PC, right? So you want to have the same level of protection. And honestly, when you're looking at gaming and you look at the quality of service and the stuff, you're gonna want your biggest pipe coming into your game so you don't have any lag or problems there. So really, it's you're looking at other methods rather than isolation. Now, if you're crazy like me and have like a router that does three different networks, like two different if you're using Wi-Fi, you've got two different 5G networks, you can isolate like that and have two internals. It may be worthwhile just doing that for kids in general, but it's still a more protected internal network rather than just having a guest kind of free for all.
Okay, that's great advice. And finally, I do want to say to the parents around screen time, we have resources on our site, which I'll share with you in a minute. But the managing of screen time in general with children is to use the 24-hour exercise. And that 24-hour exercise is a conversation framework. When it's, Matt, you're basically talking about this, and that is, within a 24-hour period, ask your kids, well, how much time do you need to do the things that are healthy for me physically? How many hours do I sleep, have meals, go outside to exercise, ride my bike? How many hours do I need to support myself as a learner? How much time do I spend in school doing homework, maybe practicing a hobby or skill like an instrument or some other thing that they're learning? And then how many hours in a day does it take to support the relationships in my life? So family time, which could be screens, but really family time, time with friends in a safe, socially distant manner, and so on. Now, if there's time left over, that could be used for screens of any kind. It could be gaming, it could be social media, it could be binge watching Netflix. But let's say you're left with 4 hours. It doesn't mean they should spend 4 hours on the screen if you don't feel that that's healthy for them. That's where tools like the one that Matt showed you today within the Xbox, the ones we mentioned in screen time under iOS devices, these can really help you, enforce whatever rules you're saying. Okay, we've done all the things that are healthy for us. Now, with this time left, here's how much you can use. Screens for fun it's a good exercise because it teaches your children to begin prioritizing those things that are really important for them and healthy for them. And so it sounds, Matt, like your son is well on his way at 7 years old. He knows if I do these things, then I will be able to do, some free time for fun on the games. So with that, I want to thank you again, and a couple of things to our audience. You can reach out to us at internetsafety.trendmicro.com if you have additional questions. I also want to encourage the audience to, when you leave today, there will be a survey that pops up. And if I could share my screen here with you really quickly here. And it will ask you to complete a very short survey. If you're willing to answer that and leave your email address, you could be one of 5 winners of Trend Micro Maximum Security, which will protect up to 5 devices in your home. And so we highly encourage you to complete that. Other things we recommend for some of the tips that we talked about today, that Matt shared with you today, and I shared with you today, you will find a whole bunch of them at internetsafety.trendmicro.com. This is just a few of them that you're seeing here. And we also specifically have a tip sheet on gaming, which covers a lot of the things we talked about today. So please go review those, share them with family and friends, maybe for those who are buying the Xbox or the PS5 this holiday. And there's another great resource from the Center on Media and Child Health that you will find both at their site, but also we have it on ours, um, just around general digital wellness. Highly, highly recommend you read and share it with others. So again, thank you so much, Matt, for being with us today. Thank you to our audience for sticking with us today. This has been a great conversation. I could talk to you forever about it. And I encourage everybody to join us on December 16th. This will be our final session for 2020. And that session, we will actually have, our guest will be the COO, Senior Vice President and COO of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, to talk to us about selfie safety, and in particular, the cases they have seen when kids are using social media and posting photos of themselves that could potentially put them at some risk. And the cases they've particularly been seeing at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Please join us for that session, and please encourage others to as well, because I think this holiday, many children will be receiving perhaps their first phone. And it is the camera that they love about it the most, but it's also the camera that could potentially present some risk. So I encourage you to join us. Again, thanks everybody for joining us. And today's session was recorded and will be posted on the same website, internetsafety.trendmicro.com. Thank you, everybody. See you in a couple of weeks. And Matt, it's been great connecting with you again. Maybe I'll see you on Minecraft these days.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for joining us as well.
Thank you very much. Just ending, don't be scared of games. There's a lot of great things that can come from it. Someone mentioned about educational stuff. There's Tinker and Scratch Junior for coding. And then we also do a lot of charity work to help kids at hospitals to raise money through gaming as well. So there's a lot of good uses for that.
Oh, yes. And I apologize, Matt. We were going to talk about Extra Life. So I think if you could give it a couple of minutes, I'd love for you to share Extra Life with us.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's one thing that I've been involved in since my son was born, really. But there is a charity organization with Children Miracle Hospitals called Extra Life, and it's basically a 24-hour gaming marathon where we raise money for our local hospitals, and everybody across North America can play. And it's extra-life.org if you're interested in looking into it. Trend has been amazing and allowed us to do an online event or an in-office event every year. We've raised lots of money for the kids. And this year alone, the Extra Life organization has raised $15 million for all of the kids in the Children's Miracle Network hospitals across the country. And so instead of riding a bike doing a 5K and doing something hard, we just get together and play games and have a great time. Gamers are very passionate people, and we leverage that to raise money for kids that really, really need it, especially this year, because many of those hospitals are actually overflow hospitals. And so, these kids are the ones that are at risk, and so they're doing a lot to take care of those kids. But we're proud to be part of it. And yeah, if anybody's interested, we do it every single year. And so we'll be doing our 5th annual Trend one next year.
Yeah, I highly, and that's a great thing to put maybe on the 2021 New Year's resolution. If you work in an organization that would be willing to host an Extra Life marathon to raise money for these children's hospitals, especially at this time, I think it's a great cause. And I've not signed up for it yet, Matt, at Trend, and I'm putting it down on paper. I'm going to do it next year.
Now it's recorded.
As much as I love sleep, I will.
Well, the great thing is you don't have to do it for 24 hours straight, right? You can plug away. We actually typically break it up into 12-hour sessions, but you can just come in and join and play at any time. It's really just about getting together for a good cause, and to help out kids. But and it's any kind of gaming. It's not just video games. It's board games. It's pen and paper like Dungeons and Dragons. It's foosball and pool. Like it's just any kind of game. Gamers just love to game. So we do everything, and that's what we do to have just tournaments and do things like that to raise money for the kids.
That's fantastic. And thank you for setting a great example for all of us, but especially your son. I think we could all learn from what you're doing.
Thank you.
So again, thank you everybody for joining us today, and we will see you in 2 weeks.
Everybody.